Good morning, and I know we've got puppies coming up next, but if you bear with us, I promise this will be, well, nothing like the puppies at all. I think we're not going to get there, right? But let's start. We're going to talk about segmentation, but let's introduce yourself, please, Julia.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Julia Edwards, Director of Corporate Lodging at Expedia Group.
My name is Matt McCardle. I'm a Senior Lodging Partnerships Manager at TripActions.
Good morning, everyone. How lovely to see you all. James Parsons from OTA Insight, working with our big clients, Strategic Account Director. Thanks.
Perfect. So, yeah, thank you for joining, first of all. So we spoke this morning and also when we did a pre-talk, and I think there was a Skift article earlier this month about the great merge. And I think the panel beforehand just covered the same kind of topic here, where you see a completely different change in traveler, how their behavior is, what's happening. The example from myself, I arrived Saturday, I check in at the hotel. Do they class me as a business traveler? I arrive at the same time, there's a big concert happening here. So what am I? So how do you differentiate between consumers now? And what have you noticed of the changes being, Julia?
Yeah, I definitely think the bleisure term is ever blending right now. So myself included, I'm actually going to be flying out just after this to head to Paris for a hospitality event that we're going to be hosting. I'll be staying over the weekend, but will I be classified as a business or leisure guest by the hotel? I'm not sure. But yeah, I do think there's that ever blending bleisure business that we keep seeing happening right now.
Yeah. And Matt, what about you? So obviously you've kind of in the industry a long time, but the space that you're now representing is kind of changed in some ways and moving closer to the end-to-end solution. So how have you noticed those changes at TripActions?
Yeah, absolutely. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with TripActions, we are a full end-to-end corporate travel management, payments, and expense solution. So really managing the full trip, the full journey of the traveler from booking all the way to what used to be submitting expense reports, but automated, expensing and everything. But yeah, it's just becoming more of a trend, and regarding specifically bleisure again, as we're going to keep talking about today, it's really important to give the travelers that are working for a company that the technology and the tools to be able to make the decisions both for work travel and for their leisure travel as well, whether that's staying at the same hotel as part of their corporate program, or in many cases, such as myself, finding a different option that's much more affordable when I'm actually paying the bill. But yes, it's just the visibility that is required for travel managers and also for hotels specifically it's becoming more and more important, as just the travel trends are just changing so significantly since 2019 specifically.
Okay. And James, from a data point of view, are you seeing anything in data that would kind of back up anything that we're hearing in terms of bleisure happening, or rate changes, or demand changes? We hear the 4-day working week happening, so what happens on a Friday now, and maybe it goes to a 3-day working week. Maybe we're already doing that. Do weekends exist, right? These are all the questions. But what are you seeing from a data perspective?
Yeah, so we see huge leisure demand. I mean, it's not, Jan from STR was talking about this yesterday. Thursday travel has become, do your meetings, stay for the weekend. We see the same in the data in sort of enhanced rates over the weekends, but leisure I think there's still, despite some headwinds coming, it still seems that the demand for leisure is just absolutely crazy. And we see that reflected in the rates, where they're higher through the Thursday, through the weekend. But again, we had a really interesting discussion. We've all got some bleisure or bits and pieces that kind of can't be quite classified. And I feel, to sort of go to the question, I actually feel quite sorry for the hoteliers that are amongst us, because I think it's becoming harder and harder to classify. How do you sell to classify your corporate, if they are a corporate bleisure? How do you, is there something that you need to be doing slightly differently for those customers that have families, dogs? Talked about a little bit in the previous panel. I think it just is, the data, it just becomes harder and harder. I think TripActions is something that's really interesting. It's something we use at OTA Insight, and it's a very convenient way to book, and it's a convenient way to get sort of everything in one place, and there is a lot of control that can be used by our company in terms of controlling the travel spend, and you can book leisure through it. So I'm not selling TripActions, just something
that was my job.
But again, I think when we use that platform and the channels that we're able to book through, sort of Priceline, Expedia, and Brand.com, again, I think it makes it very hard for the hotels and the hotel companies to really segment and find a way of, classifying those customers. So it's a really interesting one. The other one I think is, and I wanted to ask, Ben is our esteemed moderator, but I wanted to ask Ben because he's the hotelier amongst us. I think one of the big changes we have heard from clients and we see as group. Group, I think, as Jan was talking about it yesterday, coming back, and that is amazing news because I think group can really prop up business. It can really make markets absolutely hum, as we see in different bits. But I think this is a contracting potentially a nightmare because of COVID, and we've had a few people drop out of meetings this week because of that. But how does that affect a big group? Like if you have a big COVID outbreak in your company meeting, and you have a group of 200 or 300 rooms for 4 or 5 nights, how does that affect that? How, as a hotelier, are you going to contract that, and how has that changed? Because it has to change to offer more flexibility.
Yeah, fully. And I think the key thing is we obviously we don't know what will happen in the winter season, but COVID will be here for a period of time. It's a case of we're having to work out how we handle that, right? But the one thing that hasn't really changed, I think, in the industry is group cancellation terms. They're still sat at kind of 90 days for most larger groups. Am I going to commit to an event of 500 people with a 90-day cancellation in the winter? I'm not so sure I would. So I think we have to now look at flexibility. I think there's interesting ways that you can kind of bundle and package to do with insurance rather than cancellation, but I think that could be the way of kind of how we see overcoming it. I guess who knows, right? Who knows? I think group travel does start to come back and you can start to see that happening. What I think was interesting, I think, in a couple of the panels as well, is that we've kind of heard the data telling us that business travel is not back and individual business travel is not back. I kind of dispute that. And the only reason I dispute it is to do with segmentation. Because we think that the corporate travel is not back, but as we discussed, well, we're all here for corporate reasons. We came primarily, and if my finance director is here, the expenses I had were purely business reasons only, right? They were nothing else. But they are, right? So we're here for business reasons. So is it, and particularly, Julia, from your time with Agency originally and now Expedia, do you see that business travel, is it still there? It's just booking in a different way?
Absolutely. I mean, I do think, obviously, segmentation, as we mentioned, is important. I think a lot of things that we're hearing from a lot of our hotel partners is the focus on SME travelers specifically and watching that segment grow and how to target SME travelers specifically. But I do think there's travelers coming back in the other segments as well, in the multinational and global segments. I mean, I think it's slow, but as people are entering the offices again, it's coming back. So in order to be able to identify these travelers right now and be able to target them, I think is really where we're trying to help position the hotels and help drive them.
Yeah. Okay.
And just to add a little bit more onto that, that's one of the crucial parts of my job and working with hotels directly, because they'll see some GDS content coming available where they know it's a corporate traveler, but again, we also sell OTA rates, and the hotels, obviously they see the bookings, but they don't necessarily know that it's business travel bookings, valuable client corporate travel, arriving at their property. So it's part of my job just to share the data, the visibility, review the different channels that are kind of coming through, and additional opportunities for them to even further attract those clients on our platform.
And who are those clients now? So who is the kind of, you package it up and making sure everything's visual and aware, but is it the travel manager that's the booker, or is it the end user? What have you noticed the change there?
So, of course, the travel manager is still going to be the decision maker. They're choosing the technology, the platform, the TMC. But I mean, working at TripActions, it's awesome that we have a product that is able to put some power into the travelers' hands. As you mentioned, we do have a dynamic policy, and through different content providers, we've been talking a lot about content. We're able to pull in as much relevant information about the hotels as possible and provide that to the travelers, allow them to have some power to make decisions. Stay at a hotel that is actually kind of comfortable for them, or something that they kind of want to try out, maybe a new concept hotel. Or actually, we've been seeing a lot of bookings going to, because a lot of our client base is young tech companies, young travelers, millennials such as myself, and a lot of times we're seeing that they just want a new experience. They want to go to a place with a massive rooftop bar or shared collaborative spaces that their team's kind of flying into town from all around the country or around the world. So it's to answer your question, I guess a lot of power we're seeing being shifted to the travelers, which is awesome because, especially as we've been discussing this whole conference, travel's becoming more of a perk rather than just like a transaction part of business. It's becoming, an added benefit or, an awesome opportunity for employees and to even attract talent for some companies in many cases as well.
And to speak to the full service TMCs who are obviously kind of customizing the process for the traveler, the personalization that goes into some of these booking tools are really phenomenal, the way that they can help drive the traveler to exactly what they're looking for.
And in regards to that content, so talk to me about that. When you say what the traveler's looking for, what are you seeing? What would be the advice you would give to the hoteliers in the room more so about how it should be packaged, what's critical, and what have you seen that maybe that has changed since 2019?
Yeah, so flexible cancellation policy is definitely something that we're seeing that's being used as a filter for a lot of our search criteria right now. So that's definitely something I would take a look at and make sure it's as flexible as possible for the corporate travelers.
Yeah.
And to add on a very kind of similar piece, we've been talking a lot about payments this whole conference, this has been great for me to learn a lot about the innovation in the industry. But we're also seeing a lot of travelers or bookers that are looking for pay now options. They want to pay almost everything up front because there's new hires starting at companies. Maybe they don't have their corporate card yet, and they just want to make the traveler experience as easy as possible at check-in. And there's a lot, again, younger travelers out there that maybe don't have credit cards to put down the whole payment at the property. So we're seeing a lot of requests for immediate payment or payment over time booking. So it's just as easy as possible for the traveler when they do check in.
Yeah. Okay. And James, from obviously your business is more to do with data and forward-looking and advanced-looking data. Do you see anything, or do you kind of segment anything within your business in terms of looking at price patterns? Is there a way that you would define, how do you define what's business, what's leisure, or is it just by day of week?
It's typically just by day of week, although we have some products that, again, my pitch is coming shortly. No, we have some fantastic products that look at forward-looking search data in terms of flight searches, hotel searches, and all that sort of stuff, which I think it can be sort of segmented. If you're looking at GDS searches, that's typically corporate. If you're looking at sort of meta searches, which we do also track, that can be leisure, sort of mostly looking for your weekend stays. But I did just want to come back on the previous point about the corporate business. I think it's amazing to be back and traveling, and it's so lovely to see people, and we place very high value on that. But what we find is, in terms of when will that corporate travel come back, is that I think it's quite patchy because, as an example, in the UK, we have not had COVID. It doesn't exist effectively, and we're open, and people are open to do meetings, and you want to come and see it. We've tried to do in-person meetings with our US clients and found their offices still closed to outside meetings. So we've had to host either in their location or find somewhere within that destination to host a meeting. The clients themselves are desperate to get back out and start doing the meetings, but their corporate policy, I think, is the thing that's holding that back. And on the other side of the world in APAC, again, we have only, as of, I think, last week, only just reopened our Singapore office. And restrictions there are still very sort of, it's not draconian, but I think what that leads to is a sort of reluctance of the big companies there to allow their people to travel, to allow their people to meet in person. And I think until it's great to see so many people travel for this conference or to be in Las Vegas as I was last week or wherever it might be. But there are big chunks of the world where that's not happening yet. And I think we'll only really see a true return of corporate when people feel a bit safer, people feel, and restrictions aren't quite, again, at the moment, if you're going to do a multi-leg travel, you kind of got to work out which parts of that need COVID certification, which don't, and that's still, I think, a really big barrier for a lot of big companies who, again, don't want to have someone go and spend a lot of time in Las Vegas, catch COVID, and then come back to the office. I think we overall feel sort of pretty bullish about it. But again, I think there are patches that, and again, Ben, you've got lots of hotels all over, so it's interesting. But also for the other two, are we seeing some stuff come back and some not, or is it because we see some fantastic performance and some amazingly high rates, sort of a lot of cities and Jan talked to this yesterday, of hotel rates being way above what they were in 2019 already, and it just is, I don't know, it feels a little bit like this. I feel very optimistic. I feel there's a huge amount of pent-up demand. There's still, I love being back on the road. I think we all share the same, it's all, we've had some really good chats, and it's been really nice to see people. And I think that will last, but there's, again, just a bit patchy perhaps.
Even just the fact that to get into the US, no matter where you are in the world, you have to have a COVID test within 24 hours. I was at a conference last week as well, and we lost a few panelists because they tested positive, and had to do a couple last-minute changes. So I think, and speaking with corporates as well, that even that restriction is still holding back a lot of the international travel. But yeah, definitely domestically in the US, it's been very strong. People are paying the prices, which has been great. But it goes back to the whole point of, as a traveler and as a travel management company, you got to make sure that the travelers have access to testing requirements. What are the visa processes? Can I even go to this specific country? And is it worth that trip at this time, or is it going to hold off for a couple more months?
Yeah.
And in regards to the TMCs, when you see the kind of end-to-end booking, how do you even begin to segment an end-to-end booking, right? If you've got the different layers of flight and in transfer and hotel, how do you talk to us about how you kind of really think that you try and bucket those into a segment, and why is that still important?
I can start with that one. I mean, of course, as a travel management company, you want as many bookings as possible to come through your actual platform. So it becomes important to also have like a more leisure-facing booking platform within the overall travel management company. So we do have a leisure-specific booking part. Of course, that data, of course, is confidential to the traveler themselves, because the company doesn't need to know where people are going for their personal travels. But it's all about the booking experience. A traveler should be able to book something, make it, as mentioned in the past session, make a check mark. This is for business travel. These couple days are for personal travel. Of course, the flights are typically paid for by the company in most cases. But even that type of technology, is it much of a difference to fly out, 5 days further, do some leisure travel before that, or is that going to be a significant increase in the cost to the company, or even a decrease? And maybe if you fly out on a Saturday versus a Monday, for example, that's actually can save the company some money. So. At the end of the day, it's important to make sure that the technology that the travelers have access to is enabling them to make those decisions, and again, encourage them to do so, again, as kind of like a perk of business travel.
And from you, Julia, anything different?
Yeah, I mean, just going in line with the segmentation as well, I think from the hotel standpoint, being able to identify that traveler as being the corporate traveler is very important. So that way you're not that you would ever treat a corporate traveler differently, but just that you can at least identify that traveler and have that almost as a touch point, upon check-in, so you can really reach out to them, and if there is a prospecting opportunity to make that introduction and reach out to the traveler upon their stay. I think being able to identify this person as a corporate traveler and understand why they're there in your property is very important.
And have you seen any change in segmentation since kind of post-pandemic? So as we start to come out, you see travel coming back. Have you changed the way that you segment customers?
Not really, no. I think we still kind of segment the customers the same way at this point, but.
I mean, by definitions, we're segmenting in the same way, like our larger accounts, small SMEs and everything. But not to keep repeating myself, but at the end of the day, the opportunity is to present the technology, because regardless, technology is key for no matter what type of industry you're in or size company you work for. It's the technology that is available to you again to empower the traveler to make those decisions, while still getting the data and the consolidation and for duty of care and reporting purposes. So. To answer the question, I mean, it hasn't really changed too much, but it's the core of what is important, at least for trip actions, has remained the same.
And James, anything you see in the future in terms of segmentation changing or needing to change in the future, kind of post-summer? So we're in this situation where obviously we're seeing a huge rebound of travel, and the question is that sustainable? Does it continue, or is it just this, right? Everyone just wants to get back on the road again because they haven't done for so long. And then so once that decision is made post-summer, does the kind of level stay the same? Do you think there's a need to change anything segmentation, or the way that either TMCs or hoteliers should look at the business?
Yeah, I think we're in a really funny spot, because I think globally we have a cost of living problem, inflation, and being in Vegas last week, I was very struck at how much more expensive it is to go there. Like, I couldn't quite believe the cost of the flight. So I'm used to traveling to Vegas and it being a sort of $120 to $180 flight from somewhere close by. So if I'm in Dallas, it's not expensive to go there. And I think we paid over $500 for that flight. I mean, this is extraordinary price increase. I mean, I haven't done it for a while, but I do think that the cost of living, and I'm not sure how long some businesses will bear that cost if we are still so used to doing Zoom meetings and doing all of these sorts of things. I also think we, as a company, we have offices all over, but we've become remote first. That makes a really interesting, I think as a company, you have to behave in a very different way when you become remote first, because your people are a little bit disparate. They do crave coming together to spend time together. And I think we are really strongly considering doing some things like having sort of less office space, so spending less money on actual physical office and spending more time together, either in a hotel setting or in a WeWork type setting, where we actually say once a month to all of our people, can you, let's mark this month and let's all go and stay. And I think, just this is sort of this change is going, is happening, whether we like it or not. And we saw Jan again from CoStar yesterday saying that they had you've got to go back to the office, and then not being able to hire. I think the workplace has intrinsically changed. But I think the way that to answer the question, the way that hotels and the travel management companies sort of need to adapt to that, I still think there's a lot of unknowns out there, and how they actually deal with customers like me or like you guys who are, this is my 10th day on the road, and I had a long weekend in Vegas, but it was still corporate because we did some corporate stuff while we were there. But the pricing of that hotel room that I was staying on the Strip, and the price over the weekend went through the absolute roof. And I had to move because it was out of our travel policy to spend that much money on the thing. But as a corporate customer, and as a corporate customer of that specific chain that I was staying in, it comes back to some of the other topics that have been covered. Attribute personalization, I can't speak. As a customer of that hotel chain and having loyalty and rewards, the rate going from sort of $80 on the Tuesday up to sort of $300-400 on the Thursday, up to like $700-800 on the Friday, Saturday.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a revenue management system that I think is producing that pricing. But, I moved. I didn't stay because actually that's so far out of our pricing range. And I think this is still something that that needs to be, we've talked at a lot of conferences, and people talk about this stuff and personalization and actually thinking about what the customer is doing and lifetime spend. And actually now that we are in this pleasure, blended, whatever you want to call it, I think that's something that needs to become a bit more thought through. And I understand the demand for that weekend was through the roof, and I understand why the rate needs to be that high. But I am staying through Tuesday. I would have stayed Tuesday through Sunday. So that sort of thing, I think, again, we seem to be still stuck in revenue management system sort of pricing from before. And I would have stayed if it had been quite a lot more, but not that massive. It really is a huge change. And it's not, it's one of the Strip hotels, I won't name it, but it's not that great a hotel. It's not, for me, as a corporate traveler, I'm not going to spend $700 in that hotel. There's just no way. The product is not there for that.
Yeah.
Demand in the market perhaps is there for that rate, but the actual product itself, not so much.
And Julie, so at started your career, you were on property-led roles. So as far as my understanding in 25 years now of looking at segments, right, we haven't changed in the hospitality industry. There's still corporate group meetings, Smurf, whatever it would be. So was there any advice that you think that you would give to the hoteliers to say, well, maybe, we're seeing this change in travel behavior. Should there be a change in the way that we look at the segments?
I would say the biggest opportunity is probably within, the loyalty and understanding how to vie for this traveler again and understand who these travelers are that are staying with you. I know specific brands do a really fantastic job of really understanding who the traveler is, why they're there, and I think it's definitely something to take note and really try and use your resources to understand how to best understand your travelers who are there inside and out to get that return traveler back in again.
Yeah.
I've been hearing a lot of hotels, hiring very front, as much as you can, hire a very strong, front desk, someone that work at the front desk, because they can have that conversation, get some intel as to maybe why they're traveling. Maybe they booked an Expedia rate through their TMC, but then the hotel has that insight, maybe gets their email address, and they have that insight as, oh, this is actually a corporate traveler. Maybe there's, again, as you just mentioned, an opportunity to bring them back in the future, because, a lot of times you go to a new city, you're going to be traveling there a lot in the future. You have a good experience at a hotel, you're very likely going to go and stay there again. So there's a couple tricks I've been hearing from hotels to kind of, again, figure out, who exactly is a traveler, even if it's not until they actually arrive on property.
Yeah. Okay. And do you think it's more important in regards to, for a hotel to look at the segment that the customer sits in or the lifetime value of that customer? It's a leading question for all three of you.
It is a leading question. I would say the lifetime value of the traveler. If that's your end goal is to get this person to come back over and over again, I think that's worth more than understanding the segmentation of that one specific trip.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as we've been discussing, almost most trips that I do are both leisure and for work. So, if I have the chance, if you have the chance to get me again in the future for either purpose, why not? So I agree.
I think it's interesting. I think loyalty is one of the things where it kind of feels, certainly using trip actions, that very often we'll just go with the cheapest price. And I think as this cost of living stuff and all the rest of the pain that's going on out there increases, you will see less sort of loyalty, more sort of, right, I'm going to go with the cheapest price. Yep. If it's within shouting distance of where I want to be, okay, I'm not going to worry so much about my Marriott Award points or my Hilton Honors or whatever that might look like. And I think as a hotel company, again, I just would have sympathy. I think it's very, very difficult if you're not getting the data. And again, just to pick up on something you said, I have a good friend in a London hotel who they have objective key results for their front desk and on how much data they can get out of the actual guest when the guest is standing next to each other. And to me, this is a slightly horrifying throwback to a long time ago when we rely on the front desk agent to get the data that you need to run your business in a way that is practical and obvious. And it just seems that technically we seem to have gone backwards and not forwards. And that really, I know for the industry, had such pain during the pandemic, and there was no money. But we, as a company, have sort of hoped that technically some hotel companies would have stepped forward and invested so that things like this don't happen. But I think it just becomes much harder.
One of the questions we've had from the audience, and thank you for that, is that in regards to revenue management, so talking about rates particularly, but hotels have traditionally priced on segment, and that's the way that we've kind of always done things, and we price on segment. So do you think that needs to change? Maybe Judy, a question for you.
Yes and no. I do think there needs to be a revisit sometimes on the traditional revenue management, ways of pricing hotels, because obviously the lines have blended so indiscreetly right now. But I do think, if the property is specifically just a leisure-focused hotel, to be priced that way specifically. Segmentation as far as the corporate travelers go, I think is another way to consider the pricing as well, how you would price your SME segment versus your multinational global travelers and such. So and just to add on, depends on how you're referring to the segmentation, I suppose.
Yeah,
but.
And just to add on to your last one regarding corporate rates, working with corporates, again, we're seeing significant travel out of the small, mid-sized accounts that maybe don't qualify for an individual corporate rate with your property, but they're traveling a lot, they're going to major cities a lot. So again, the opportunity to work with your TMC or whatever distributors you work with, and making sure that you're offering on their product is also compelling. The content's up to date. There's a dynamic discount off of the best available rates, because again, travelers are now have a lot more flexibility. They don't necessarily have to stay at one specific hotel. Certain hotels will be priced kind of higher. One hotel might have a group wash a couple days before check-in. So if you have that compelling rate, a good better than the market rate out there. Again, you'll attract the corporate travelers, just maybe not in the standard way of 100 room nights with one specific company, but maybe 500 room nights across 10 different companies that are traveling. So different ways to kind of look at it.
Yeah. And another question we had is, so leisure travel, the question is, it's always existed, right? But just in a different form. And so why do you think we struggle now more with this segment than pre-pandemic? James, anything that you would add on that?
Yes, I think this is a really interesting question. I think it did always exist and people did always extend their travel. But I think from my personal experience of where I live in the north of England, pre-pandemic, you couldn't take your pet, it was difficult to get sort of family-size rooms. And this has changed completely with the sort of, in the UK, we have this vast, huge population of people who are traveling internally. And as a result, there isn't a single hotel in the north of England or in Scotland now where you can't take a dog or even a cat. I mean, that's seeing people walking their cats on leads is not now unusual outside of a hotel. And I think we always had it before, but we just never had it to the same level that we have it now. And that, I think, is possibly why we struggle with that segment and pricing it in a way that is conducive and helpful to the user. Really, really good example. I was talking to one of our lovely customers yesterday, and they tripped to Nashville for work, conference, 4 days in the hotel with conference rate, but still very expensive. Nashville is one of those amazing cities. Do visit if you never have, because it's fantastic. Stayed in the hotel, corporate rate, still very expensive. Family came to visit, immediately moved to a VRBO for the remainder of the weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, because there's 4 now rather than 1. There's 4 people. They're a family, 2 adults, 2 grown-up children who want to go and have fun in Nashville, and actually they don't want to spend time in 2 separate hotel rooms or with a connecting door. They want to have breakfast all together in the same place, and they want to hang out and catch up. You know, the children are at college, the parents are, they've flown the nest. They want to catch up. They don't necessarily want to sit around a table in a restaurant that's got hundreds of people and is really noisy. They just want to, quality time like that, I think, is very important. I think that's something that, again, when you have a very fixed bedrooms that are bedrooms and public areas that are very busy, we struggle with that. And it's why we see short-term rentals exploding, as we heard in the previous panel. I think I forget the number, but again, it's absolutely crazy. We at OTA Insight also have access to some short-term rental data, and it is crazy how much this has exploded.
Yeah. So we're running out of time. We've got one final question. I'm just going to ask you for a 2-word answer. It's going to be the question that's on the screen. So it's going to be, will traditional base building segment wholesale FIT recover to pre-pandemic levels? And my follow-up question is by when? So either yes or no, and by when, and I will hold you to it when I look at my budgets for next year. Julia?
Yes, 2026.
Oh, wow, okay.
I'll
Cautious.
say yes, 2025.
Oh, okay, James?
I'm going to copy you, yes, 2025. And the only other comment I would add is that one thing we have seen is chains do some very interesting stuff with that, with regards to Expedia, Marriott being one. We hear others that consider similar things, and I think that is a way of firstly controlling it, but secondly also getting it back to, if you can get it under control and it's not causing lots of parity issues, you can really do a lot with it. But we also feel very bullish about the market. So yeah,
Good.
I'd say late 24, early 25.
Right in between.
Yeah, I'll go between.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time. Really enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.